Hey everybody, it's Raph here, founder and host of the Canvas Series podcast. So today I'm going to share with you a panel that I did with George Khalife, founder of the Bookback app and host of Let's Grab Coffee podcast, as well as Marc Champagne, founder of the Keo app and host of Keo Conversations. You know, both of these gentlemen have also been on the show, and if you haven't already, I highly recommend you check their episodes out as they have an amazing story to share. So, on this panel, we talk all things entrepreneurship, content creation, podcasting, and personal development, right? And big shout out to Daniel Breez and Kelly Foss, founders of the ImpactX meetup. You know, this community is like a second home to us, as you know, their mission is to promote a growth mindset, something all three of us truly believe in and stand behind. So please enjoy this panel and let us know what you think, right? The best place to find us is on Instagram, and all of our handles are in the show notes below. Enjoy.
Just keep trying, right? Keep trying and growing and enjoying that journey.
I think for me, you know, something about me other than like my bio, you know, like as Daniel mentioned, very intentional person, very systematic. But I would say that that's largely driven by a sense of curiosity, a sense of adventure. And that's kind of how I view everything, my day-to-day, my podcast, my personal and professional development. It's driven by the sense of wanting to see new things, try new things, a very experimental kind of mindset, but being very intentional about it, right? So, you know, George mentioned something interesting about, you know, doing things that give you more energy and take away. I would say that, you know, doing something like this drains me, but I think knowing, exhausted. But I would say that, you know, doing something like this, knowing why I'm here, you know, why I agreed to jump on this panel and do this talk, there's a reason behind all of this, right? It's to share a message, to encourage others to do the same, to give you the tools and systems and processes of how I think about doing it, and to encourage you to think about, you know, what works for you. And I think having a strong, I guess, why, and like being very intentional about that, and then letting curiosity kind of carry you throughout the middle parts is kind of how I approach everything and who I am at the core.
Guys, feel free to jump in. There's no formality to this, but my next question, I'm going to start with Rav. So, how does reflective questioning come into play there? Do you have any certain reflective questions that you ask yourself every day or on a consistent basis? And how systematic are you with asking yourself those reflective questions?
Yeah, so I'd say every day. You know, whether it's, you know, nowadays it's at the end of the day, and sometimes I do the meeting. And this has been a very like experimental process, right? Like it's changed, you know, throughout the years since I started doing it. But you know, some of the questions I ask myself, and this is something that, you know, Marc and I talked about in the past as well. There's like the, you know, like what am I grateful for today question. But you know, some of the other interesting questions I ask myself is, you know, what am I excited for? You know, whether it's like the day off or for tomorrow, depending on what I'm asking it. What are some of the interesting thoughts and decisions I made throughout the day, right? You know, what is something I did today that, you know, really pushed the boundaries? And I really try to ask these questions to get myself identifying and becoming self-aware, right? So I think, you know, part of the earlier question about, you know, how do you figure out who you are? You know, one thing that worked for me is asking questions and writing it down, and then, you know, coming back to it. And every once in a while when I open up, you know, back then I used to write it in like my notepad, and now I use more Keo, which is a great app, by the way.
Plug in.
Yeah, right. And you know, it's like it's crazy when you look back and you see what were some of your thoughts and, you know, what you did a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, and you really see your own personal growth and development. And yeah, that's kind of how I do it.
Well, probably no surprise, questions are a part of my daily routine and life. I mean, Keo started because of that, right? Just because of powerful questions. But what I've been doing quite a bit recently is really, I'd call it like release and energize. So in asking powerful questions like, how am I feeling right now? Get out of your head, but if you feel stressed, like where do you feel that in your body? And like really sit with that for a bit. And then, you know, what's causing that? And then a great follow-up question is, you know, what am I worried about? And you just start, it's hard to explain, but the more you write that out, or it doesn't even have to be right now. Like that's the other thing. I'm not using Keo every day. I have the questions every day, but I might be walking somewhere, I may be on the streetcar, I'm thinking and trying to release that. And I think when you start releasing those worries and then follow it up with, what's amazing right now or what made me smile today, it's incredible how you can shift your mindset and how a lot of those worries are just narratives, right, that we're forming. There's legit worries, obviously, in life, but I'd probably say 90% of them are usually a narrative of some sort. And it literally, like, I've interviewed people who literally saved their life. So it's powerful stuff. And, you know, just, that's an extreme example, but even just taking you from performing at average or feeling average to just rocking it every day, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I like that. I think a lot of it comes down to perspective, to be honest. Like, I have immigrant parents, right? And so my mom, she used to always hammer this down. My dad, too. Got love for both of them, it's all good. But my mom used to always tell me, she's like, before you go to bed, make sure you make someone's day better, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be something crazy, right? Like financial, just something is like, if you see someone's vibe is down, right? They're having a bad day, you can also make it much worse. Or you can be that person who actually lifts them up, even if you're having a bad day, right? It's all really about choices. So that's the first thing. The second thing is about perspective. So what I love doing is like breaking something down, right? How many of you feel like you have a very long life ahead? I mean, I hope so, but, right? Thank God. But like, if you put it into perspective, and what I mean by that is, if you wake up and you say like, look, on average we have 28,000 days. And I love this word because 28,000 days doesn't seem like a lot anymore, right? You all almost have to take a deep breath and be like, oh shit, really? What is that? That's almost 82 years. What's up, Kelly?
1,000 months.
Love it. And that's another great perspective, right? And it sounds cheesy to the average person, but like, I think what's important is, like, are you living almost a life with a sense of purpose, you know, or do you just kind of want to drift, right? Do you want your life to mean something, right? Do you want to stand for the idea of possibility, to stand for the idea of innovation? I don't know, like, I think legacy is really important for me, and I think that's macro, and then micro, it's like what Raph and Marc were talking about, right? Like, you know, doing things that make you happy, but also, like, what are you grateful for? That's another perspective, right? Like, look, a lot of my family are in Lebanon, and like, every time there's something or some turmoil or political uncertainty that happens there, I'm grateful enough to be able to come back to a country where it's stable enough for me to do the shit that I want. Do you understand how great that is, and how like 99% of my cousins and my family back home don't have that opportunity? And so a lot of that is kind of wasted because people don't understand the perspective. And so I think it's just at a macro level, like, wake up and do it, because you only have like one book of this. You know, every chapter, like, if you turn a page, you're not going to get it again. It's that simple. And so, I don't know, time is of the essence, you know what I mean? And do you want to be remembered or forgotten?
All three of you put a very strong emphasis on storytelling, and you guys talked about sales a lot too. So I'm curious, what kind of tips do you guys have, books that you would recommend, or any tips around sales? And how do you make sure that you stay authentic when you're selling?
Well, you can sniff that out, right? It's like, I've given this example before. We've all been in rooms, and maybe it happened tonight, but it could be you're face to face with someone, or there's a third person there, and you're talking to them, and they're like looking over your shoulder for the next person to come by, type thing. Meaning, you know, you're not necessarily the person they want to be talking to, or they're looking for a better conversation. Like, that online is the same thing, right? Like, you can sniff through that stuff. So I think you have anyone that you're approaching, there has to be an authentic reason there. And you hear it all the time, right? Like, just, you know, Gary, all these guys talk about this. Like, you know, put as much value up front first before you start asking for things in return. And that's how we built Keel. I mean, we haven't paid anyone in the app on these packs and content packs. And you know, we're helping promote their brand and getting their information out in an authentic way. Obviously, there's a hope there that they share it, but I'm in this for the long game. So it's building the relationship, which has fostered into these type of relationships that, to me, that's the biggest value on earth. Like, that's what makes me thrive. Books, it's like whatever resonates with you, right? I mean, for me, like you mentioned, Raph, I mean, podcasts are my kind of go-to. So, you know, I have themes. Like, do I need to hit Gary Vee, just a little kick in the ass for 5 minutes, a little bit of hustle and cursing and stuff like that? You know, that's a certain time of the day. Or I need to zen out a little bit, just relax. And, you know, there's a host of podcasts for that. I'm really into Cal Fussman these days. from Big Questions. He's knock on wood, he might be coming on the show in a couple months. But these people, like, that's who I learned from. Like, how are they answering questions, or asking questions, I should say. And the thing I learned about this whole journey and just being authentic is, and Larry King says this, right? Like, he doesn't prepare for his interviews. He just rolls off the tip of his tongue. But that works for him, right? And Cal Fussman's a bit different too. Like, he has a list of 100 questions, then he rips the sheet up, and then he sits in front of them, and it goes off. So the point being, it has to work for you. And if it works for you, then it's authentic. And ask the questions that that you want to know. There's for sure someone else out there that is interested in what you're interested in, right?
I think for me, like, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a sales guy per se, but everything I do, it's about selling and presenting and sharing an idea. And especially having started a career in management consulting, right? Like, an industry that's traditionally known for not being genuine and pretty sleazy in that regard. One thing I learned very early on that helped me do really well was actually caring, right? So to Marc's point, actually genuinely caring about adding value and then doing it. I think the idea of adding value now, everyone talks about it now. It's kind of like the cool thing to say. It's a conventional thing to say, but I don't think a lot of people actually act on it. And I think when I was in consulting, I worked with a lot of, like, entrepreneurs and startups and nonprofits. So, and not the corporate giants. And I worked with the people who worked really hard to build their businesses. And having conversations with them, you quickly realize that A, they're human too, and B, like, they put it all into this enterprise. And like, it really gets me thinking about how can I help them? How can I help the cause, right? Especially nonprofits. I think that was always, like, a very interesting one as well. So, when it comes to sales and how to do a good job at that, I think it's knowing you have to add value, which again we all know, but actually going out of your way to do it. I can think of so many examples of instances where I've gone my way, worked those late Friday and Saturday nights, not necessarily to get, like I don't get anything more from it, but it's just because I just genuinely cared and I want to help them. And then to Marc's point, it's really because I realized that very early on, this is investing in the long game. And right away, the first few days, weeks, months, years, you may not get anything in return. But it's crazy to think that some of the people I helped, like 8-10 years ago, there are business opportunities now, and like, you never know. And I think keeping that kind of long sight really puts things into perspective.
Cool. Okay, before I say my part, I guess I just want to, like, for context, how many salespeople in the room? All right, couple. What's up? You guys good? All right. I have to show more love for the salesman. Okay, so I guess I'll say a couple things. One of my favorite quotes about sales is through a book by Jeffrey Gitomer called The 12.5 Principles of Sales. It's a little red book. It's great. My favorite quote in there, I think it's in the back. It says, "A sale will earn you a commission, but a friendship will earn you a fortune." Okay, that's deep, right? The reason why that's true is because, like what the guys are saying is, your network is your net worth, right? And the more people you know, the more power you have. That's just the truth, And I think playing the long game is all about that. Like, if you look in Toronto, how small the tech community is, right? Like, I'm sure if you guys are in the tech community, if you're in the startup land, you can't walk 5 minutes on King Street without bumping into someone you know, right? And so why that's important is if you position yourself as being someone of value with a big network, well, guess what's going to happen? Karma's good, my friends, right? I think, and it's not doing it with the intention of receiving something, but eventually it's like a frisbee, right? Something is going to happen. And you can show value in many different ways. Like I said, if you connect people to each other, that's demonstrating value. And don't wait for someone to ask you for it. Like, that's the best thing. I think, Marc, you were talking about being authentic. I'll tell you something happened this morning. I got a mail, essentially an envelope, and I'm like, what's this? And I got a card, and I'm like, the first thing that popped in my mind is like someone soliciting something, right? Like janitorial services, or not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just like, it was kind of out of the norm, right? And it was from a person who I had coffee with the week before. And it was just a thank you note. He put his business card in it, and he's like, "George, thank you for your time. I appreciate the coffee, and I hope we can stay in touch." I'm like, damn, like, the first thing I did was go on LinkedIn. I'm like, dude, God bless you. Like, that's such a great thing. And what I did was I actually went to a prospect of mine, and I did the same thing. I'm like, I stole your idea. But it's funny how, hey, full transparency on this one, right? You gotta give credit. But I think that's what's cool about it, man. Like, if everything that used to be so common previously is now out of the norm, but doing these things that are out of the norm have so much value in today's time, right? Like how many of us, if it's someone's birthday, you're saying happy birthday because on Facebook, you get a notification. But how many of you actually call your friends up and be like, yo, John, Samantha, I just want to tell you, like, happy birthday. Hope you have a great year. I did that once for a friend, and they were like, whoa, dude, I think, like, you and my mom just called me. Like, I got, like, 100 notifications on Facebook, but you're the only person who called me. And so I think, doing things and positioning yourself of being not of value, but being genuine and doing things differently from people can go a long way. So hopefully that helps. In the micro?
Amazing. Actually, I was listening, you guys might appreciate it because it's a podcast called Mind Pump Media, if you've ever heard of them, but they talked about one of the guys went to wish somebody, or he got reminded on Facebook that it was their birthday, and he decided to set up a rule that if he doesn't want to wish them happy birthday, he'll just unfriend them right away.
Love it.
Okay, so talk about the fear of getting started. Like, did you guys have fears in the beginning when you started your podcast or your businesses? And why do most people have fears? And you've talked very eloquently about the difference between fear and danger. So can you talk to us a little bit about that too?
Sure thing. So, in fact, for me, and I guess you've probably heard this quote before, but fear is like false expectation appearing real, right? Or false evidence appearing real. I remember Raphael, like, this is my definition, or Marc, another friend of mine, he's like, George, it's false evidence. I'm like, okay, Marc. All right. Fear, man. So the difference between fear and danger is very simple. I'll give you 2 quick examples. When I was in grade 5, I had to give a presentation. I just came from Saudi. I was French educated, didn't know a lick of English. I was a chubby kid, mushroom cut. I don't know what my mom was thinking, but I was in grade 5 and giving a presentation about. Dad, you good? It's a long laugh, man. You were here first. It's all good. So I'm giving this presentation. I'm like sweating, stuttering. It was terrible. Teacher comes up to me after the presentation. She said, George, I just want to tell you something. She's looking me straight in the face. She's like, George, I want to tell you something. Look, like, A for effort, but I don't know if like communications is something cut out for you. I don't know if presentation is your thing. And like she said that to me, and I remember like obviously it hit hard, right? Like even though you're grade 5 and stuff, like words could really impact you. And I know someone's like, oh shit, like it really does, right? For the longest time, I had such a big insecurity about speaking in front of people. I mean, you probably don't notice it anymore, but like I put so much effort into it. And in the beginning, it used to be something that used to scare the shit out of me, like really, because her opinion was always in my head. And I remember, even speaking about it, like, it's weird, but I remember then, like, I started listening to motivational videos and stuff, and Les Brown, a speaker, said something that really hit home to me was, don't let other people's opinion of you become your reality, right? And it's so true, and I'll give you one last example. This is quick. I went skydiving in Dubai, and I'll show you the difference between fear and danger, okay? But fear is like that false evidence. You think something bad is going to happen when you haven't even done anything yet, right? It just scares the shit out of you just thinking about it. That's what happened when I wanted to go skydiving in Dubai. Something I did last minute. I was the only person to go, right? It's not like I went with some friends or cousins. I'm like, Dad, I want to go skydiving. I go skydiving. You sign this waiver. I didn't look at it. Okay, this is probably where danger comes in, but you're like, let's put danger on the side here for a second. So you sign this waiver, and then when you go up, I was the last person to go on the plane, which is bad because you're the first person to go out. Just a little tip for you guys. If you ever want to go skydiving, do not be the last person on the plane. There's no door on this plane. It's small. There's like 10 people on it, and I've never been on a doorless plane. It's pretty bad. And so you're going, and then there's like red, green, yellow, right, to tell you like to come to the podium. And you're attached to this other person, and then she tapped me on the back, and she's like, George, let's go on the ledge. And here I'm really freaking out, guys. Like, if you've ever seen a 200-pound Lebanese guy scared, it's not a good feeling, And so like I'm walking to this ledge, and she's like, I'm gonna sway you 3 times, and we're gonna jump. And I was about to pass out, And the problem is like she was like 5'5", so like her legs were dangling. It wasn't a good showing. And then lights were green, and the whole time I was freaking out because I thought I was gonna be so scared. The video's on YouTube, you can see it. As soon as I jumped, that feeling you have when you're on a roller coaster and it drops, and you do this? That's the feeling I had. That's the fear I had. The funniest part was like you never feel that. You only feel like you're vibrating. Like it's actually the most freeing kind of feeling you ever had, right? You're trying to like take all this breath, and you're like, I kept doing this the whole time, and I was so excited. And I'm trying to get the feeling because you can see the palm and at the bottom. Anyways, needless to say, it was one of the best experiences in my life. Right before though, I was literally about to like literally pass out or shit myself, like one or the other. But it turned out to be one of the best experiences. And so every time you have that fear, just know that at the end of fear is something really great. And if you just get past it, I guarantee you that feeling is always the same. Whether you do a podcast or you jump out of a plane, there's always something good out of fear.
I have legit fear just listening to that. Now I'm nervous. Yeah, I have a hard time with danger because I think, like, I resonate when you're talking about your family. I think it's hard for really any of us living here to really classify legit danger. I mean, we're here, we all walked in with our legs, and we're surviving and all of that. So for me, when I think of danger, the closest was when I first decided to leave the corporate job with a child on the way, and like, shit, if this doesn't work, like, what does that mean? But then you start going into the track, right? Like, well, if it doesn't work, there are options. We have a strong family, we have some savings, so that, like, again, that narrative starts going. So that's, I think that's the closest I've ever been to, like, legit danger. And I'd argue it's probably closer now, because now the farther you go in the journey, and like, oh, I'm not sure, is this working, is that working? Those things come back up. Fear, though, I feel comes up all the time, and I agree with you. You start learning that behind the fear is that's where you're going to develop, right? Even I remember this helped me in the podcast world back in the pharma days, like talking to, again, I'm a guy coming out of university, not with a science degree. The companies train you up on your disease state, but you're going and talking to, like, the top cardiologists in Canada, and potentially in the world, depending on where you're at. And that was legit fear. And the same thing comes up when talking to super high profile guests on the podcast. But what has always helped me through that is, like, do I want to be the fan or the peer? And the fan is the one that's, like, kind of kissing ass and stumbling around on your words, whereas the peer, like, that's the person you're going to dinner together. And I feel like it calms the nerves. They're another human being, right? No different than any of us. They have the same worries, different scale maybe, but another human being. So for me, if I think all the fear, the app, whether it's succeeding, whether it's failing, at the end of the day, like, here we are, we're having a nice chat, we have lights on, it's great, we have vitamin water from Shopify, like, it's really cool. So, like, I think it comes back to perspective, right? So it's a good day.
Two things. One, what helped me distinguish fear versus danger was really understanding the science behind it, right? Like the neuroscience, and really and I'm not going to go into it, so I encourage everyone to Google how the amygdala works, right? Like, it's part of your brain that's been around for thousands of years that kept us alive, right? And often the things that we fear are rooted back in the things that we probably would have killed us thousands of years ago, like being ostracized and getting kicked out of your friends group. Nowadays, if you weren't invited to someone's birthday, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to die. If you got kicked out of your social group tens of thousands of years ago, and you were left on your own, the chances of you not surviving increases significantly, right? So there's that distinction from a science perspective. And I think our danger detectors gets a bad rep, right? I think this fear detector, everyone's always talking about, facing your fears, and I think is really important, but it also keeps you alive, right? So something I talked about in the past was, a quick story. I was in Japan, up in Mount Fuji, and I was one of those North Americans that they told, don't climb the mountain during off season by yourself. Bad idea. And that's exactly what I did. No one knew I was going up. I was by myself. There was I can't remember what was coming on, but there was a really bad storm that hit the mountain, and I was up there after a whole day. I was exhausted. I was cold. I was wet, and then on the way down, within seconds, the storm hit the mountain. And if you're ever on a mountain that high up when a storm like that hits, you don't want to be there. Within seconds, the entire place got icy. Everything got cloudy. Like, I wouldn't be able to see the crowd. There was lightning everywhere. It was super windy. It could just tossed me off the mountain. And in moments like that, where your fear detectors are going off, it's moments like that where you want to embrace it, right? Like, your adrenaline's going. Like that's when that fight or flight kind of mentality comes up, and you really want to live and breathe and really embrace it. So I guess the point of that is just understanding that there's been fear and danger, but I wouldn't necessarily think that our danger detectors, our fear detectors are bad. I think just being aware of it, when it comes up, how to distinguish it and how to use it to your advantage.
So I'm gonna ask one more. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I want to open it up to the audience to ask some questions as well. So this is, I don't like to use the word networking, but it is a place where we can meet people, like-minded people especially, where you can find connections that might help you achieve the goals that you're looking to achieve. So what are some tips that you guys have for networking? I heard you talking earlier off stage about what tools you use to find people that you want to bring onto the shows. So talk to us a little bit about some things we can do to improve our networking skills.
I think first it's mindset, and the mindset with yourself, right? What I've learned over the last couple of years, even just putting out a list before Kia was launched, like these are the 3 people that I really want to get involved. And some of them are on the show at this point or in the app, and others aren't, obviously, but that's led to this whole other crazy network. But what that's taught me is that really anyone is accessible if you're patient and willing to put in the work. Anyone. And most people, though, will drop after a few weeks or a few months because they're just not seeing results. But like those retweets of their podcast over and over with real messages, not like, hey, this was a great talk, but like think about it, right? And like you actually legit listened to it and you picked up knowledge. Those type of interactions for a year or whatever it takes actually lead into getting some awesome people on the show. Like for us, it's crazy now. The sales cycle for me, and I feel super grateful for this, that like it's taken pressure off me, because a lot of the times what happens is the intros come in and 5 of their friends are already on the show, right? Like we're kind of a good example. We've all been on each other's shows. Like, so it's no longer like, hey, we've reached this many people, this is what we're all about. No, like 5 of your friends have been on, would you like to come too? You'd be awesome on here, for example. But that just takes months and months of kind of grinding it out and listening to their stuff and sharing, and like, again, being strategic about what you're putting out there, because that's your brand, right? So I think, yeah, just like make a list, right? And there's no limits to it. Like we have Tim Ferriss on the list. I mean, right now there's 12 people that are direct connections to him. But the patience part, instead of asking any of those people for an introduction, what I'm waiting for is to sit on some sort of panel like this with him in an event, and 5 of his friends being like, yeah, we've been on that platform for like a year, you should come onto it. But that's back to the long game, right? But it works if you're authentic.
You set a very specific intention with what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and again, it's not just because a guy like him has this crazy big podcast. It's a guy like that I was listening to that actually inspired Kia. And it was a big reason why it's all derived by questions, because the guests he was interviewing were resonating, right? So again, it's real. And even like a Cal Fussman, like if that goes down, the podcast prep will be very minimal, because I listen to it all the time, right? Or listen to him in his interviews. So yeah, just with patience and enjoy it, right? Like landing, like what's fun about this has been, okay, yeah, there was 3 people, Tim was one of them, but now there's been 100 people on the show because of that initial 3. Like that's the fun part, right? So, yeah.
So I think if the first part is probably like being really okay with rejection. And I think that's the hardest part, especially for a podcast. And the hardest part is that when you first start a podcast, you're reaching out and you need guests on your show, right? And when I first started my podcast, I just created a channel. I called it Let's Grab Coffee, and I'm like, I have a podcast now. Yeah, And I started reaching out to people, and they're like, oh, awesome. Like, who'd you have on? And I'm like, nobody. Like, that's why I'm reaching out to you. Trying to start a podcast here. But they said no. And what's funny is the first person kind of hit me a little bit because he's Lebanese. It's all good now. It's all good. But big in the blockchain space, whatever. But he legit said get a few more episodes, and then we can discuss. And I'm like, okay. And that, instead of putting me down or demoralizing me or whatever, I was actually motivated by it. And I'm like, I can't wait for the next year and a half that I come back to you. In fact, probably not come back to you. Probably the other way around. Hey George, I heard about your Let's Grab Coffee, but would love to showcase my book on it. That's what was driving me every day. And I was lucky enough to have Paul Ado, God bless his soul. He was he was cool with coming on my show in the beginning. That's big, right? Because that triggers you to have content and then to build on it. And most recently, I had Michael Hyatt, who sold Blue Cat for $500 million. Like, that was really cool to me. I'm having Drew Green, the founder of Indochino, in November. Like, now it starts rolling. It becomes much easier. But you have to be very okay with rejection. The second thing is aim for the big whales. You know what I mean? Like, as weird as that sounds, like I shot Dave, like the CEO of RBC, a message like 3 days ago. I don't care. Like, what's the word? I always say this: there's always 3 outcomes when you do that. Okay, he either doesn't respond, he or she, says no or says yes. That's a pretty good lottery bet, right? Like 1 out of 3. If he says yes, that's amazing. I'm gonna get the CEO of RBC on my podcast. Is that right? Then if they say no, whatever, I take a little ego hit. You know, I go to Krispy Kreme. Everything works out. You know what I'm saying? But I think that's what you need to keep in mind. The third thing is you really have to be persistent with networking, but also come with substance. Like, I'm baffled by how many people reach out to me on LinkedIn with no research, no substance. Like, hey George, how's it going? Like, hey, can I have a job? Like, I'm out there giving out like jobs like they're flyers, you know? And I always equate this to this metaphor. Like, if you do that in any form, not just like whether it's a guest on your show, think macro here, but if you're doing this, it's like this, okay? You just moved into a neighborhood, okay? You and your wife. You go in, your family's all settled in the house. Your neighbor comes in, literally like just blows the door off your house and just walks into your kitchen, grabs a piece of apple pie and leaves. You look at each other, you're like, what just happened? Are you likely to invite that person in again? Probably not. Now, what if that neighbor comes and offers you something, right? Value. Are you likely to invite them for dinner the same night? Of course, right? So the whole point is that, like, if someone comes to you on LinkedIn or whatever channel it is and says, look, George, like, I looked at your profile, I really think I can add value here, or I see a gap, let me run your social for free. For your next podcast, let me do the editing. Literally 3 or 4 people have done that, and it's amazing how much now I want to give them value. How many people I've referred to their business because they're trying to build their portfolio. Last thing I'll say is try different channels. You guys will be like shocked by how many people reply on Instagram if you just DM them. I've DM'd NBA players, and honestly they reach out, like it's hilarious, but like Trevor Booker is a great example, right? He started a venture capital firm on the side. I just DM'd him, I'm like, hey, we'd love to have a chat with you, and they're like, yeah, sure. You know, and so I just think try different channels and don't be afraid to go for the big shots, right?
Can I just add something to your channels? Just made me think, because one thing I've noticed as well, like especially at the end of the podcast, and I always ask the guests, right, like who's one person I should have to connect with? And normally people suggest others, and they're great people, and then weeks go by, right? And like you do maybe one follow-up, and no intro is coming through, like I don't have time to wait for that. So now I'm just leveraging their name and using, to your point, whether it's Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, wherever they're active but not oversaturated, try it, right? Like, and sometimes the intros come in at the same time, and it's like even better, right? But like I would say, be persistent and leverage all those channels, and don't wait. I mean, for us, we have a really solid purpose, and if we're waiting, there's people dying because of mental health related issues. So I want to talk to you because you might be able to save a life, right?
I think, one thing that's always worked well for me is the idea of less is more, right? I think, when you go to these large networking events, like let's say we play it out, right? It's like, hey, nice to meet you, what do you do? Cool, shake your hand, here's my card, that's it. And I think it's becoming this kind of game where it's like how many LinkedIn contacts or how many Instagram followers or how many business cards you can get. And I think having meaningful conversations where you can actually get to know someone and find opportunities and add value, that's worth more than walking out of a meetup with 20 business cards, right? That means nothing. Like I have stacks of those. So yeah, that's one. And I think the other one is, while I think this is definitely very important to reach, right? So to what I definitely do encourage that. But I think also being strategic about it and identifying who are the influencers and gatekeepers to somebody. Right, so like sales tip 101, right? Like if my buyer or someone I want to get a hold of is a CEO of a company, I may want to get to know like his or her GM or whoever it may be, right? Like we are always surrounded by influencers and people that we listen to for advice, and that's like a common thing we're talking about here. Finding those people and then building a relationship with them, and then going from there. just because I think often like the big whales, they get hundreds if not thousands of emails a day, and they might miss your note, and that's normal. So just really thinking about that, and that really plays a big role in networking events as well, right? Something I've seen that everyone always swarms like who he or she may think as like the most important or whoever person at a meetup, an event, and I think there's a lot of people left around, standing around that you can build a relationship with, and it's not always about getting in line and talking to the one person. And so,
guys, can we get a round of applause for them? These guys all have their own podcasts. They're used to asking the questions, but they've done an amazing job answering the questions. So kudos, guys. I want to open up the floor to anybody who wants to ask some questions. Okay.
Hey guys, thanks for that. One thought I had was, clearly you guys are very different in your approach in terms of personality, why you're here, and your backgrounds. But what I found interesting, which one of you brought up, was that you have to have a really solid why to get through the difficulty of getting it off the ground. But like the decision to start a podcast is something that, it's easy to start, but it's hard to understand or get to that point of, that inflection point of this is actually making sense, this is actually aiding me in my interest or my career. So what I'm trying to understand is, what was that motivation, what was that why, and was it more of a reflection or a platform for things that you were interested in to bring like-minded people, or was it like, I want to make a ton of money, or was it I want to expand my network? Like, I'm just trying to understand from your perspective, like, what it was all about and why.
As I think through it, one of them was I noticed that a lot of people, like interview the Gary Vees and Tim Ferriss and Tom Billies and whatnot, but there's not enough conversation about the everyday person, the up-and-coming entrepreneurs and creators, right? Like, interviewing Marc and George was an absolute blast because I'm catching them like early on their journey, and I'd like to think, 10, 15, 20 years from now, I can interview them again and really understand that journey, and that's something that I would imagine a lot of the thought leaders now, if they had the platform and the mediums to do that 20 years ago, they would have, but they don't, right? And it's an opportunity that we can capitalize on now, right? And then the other aspect is, understanding the why to your question. They're really thinking about, what is the bigger play, I guess, right? So as I think about, for me, a lot of the podcast is for me to learn. That's a big thing, right? Doing the research about, what these guys have talked about, researching the concepts of reflection and storytelling, and that third-party research is something I enjoy doing. As well as, for me, it's about gathering requirements for a product I'm trying to build. And the best way to gather requirements is having these kind of conversations, getting feedback from the audience, engaging on social media. That's kind of how I'm building up my research and my R&D, so to speak, to build something. So there is a bigger play to it. I think you just got to think, what is yours?
Cool.
Yeah, I agree with it. It again comes to that longer, that longer vision and longer play. And George, you mentioned it too, like the whole concept. Like if you put in the work, some results have to come, right? And it just may not be as fast or as lucrative as you think. I mean, probably all tests. We're not making millions of dollars off the podcast, and it's costing money, right? But I mean, in our case, like we need those conversations in the app to resonate with users around the world. And I'm just as kind of selfish as you on this. Like I'm learning so much, and the connections that are coming through those conversations. That's one of the most exciting parts of my day, I'd say, for the whole journey. But it's like I rarely look at the podcast stats, to be honest with you. I mean, it's not a daily thing, or when they go out, they're out there. I'm assuming it's growing. I'll check. Oh yeah, great. We had some pretty good downloads. But what's the benchmark, right? Like benchmark for me is 0. As long as we're growing, as long as we're affecting some lives, and trusting that the long-term vision or plan that we've set out as a team is correct and feels right, then we'll get there.
I think for me, like in the beginning, especially when I first started, it was because I just genuinely, like I said in the beginning, I love to connect with people, and that's really true. Like I love talking to people. I'm always curious about like your background, and I love almost like the backdrop. Like, what's your story that got you where you are, right? And even it would happen naturally. I'd go for like a business meeting, and instead of talking about the product, like be like talking about, you know, them and their family and their mom and their cousin. I know the grandma's name. Like, I was always more in tune to the personal, right? And so that's kind of the impetus in the beginning. It was also just because every time I'd reach out to someone and say, hey, you want to grab a coffee? So, you know, that's where the name came from. I think the third piece was a lot of my friends were natural introverts, like they're engineers, right? Not to generalize, but they just are. And they would always tell me, like, you know, George, you know, it's like so natural for you, like, to talk to people and you have a big network and stuff. Like, I'd love to have those conversations. So I'm like, it's kind of selfish for me to have those conversations. I might as well just put a camera in front of us. You know, have the same coffee, have a great conversation, and spread it out. I don't make any money off of it, and I honestly don't care. Like, for me, it's not about the metrics, and kind of like what Marc said, I naturally just love those conversations, and I just put it out. And that's why in the beginning I didn't focus much on the quality and stuff. I'm doing that more so now. But I think it's great to have those conversations. And so the last piece I'll say, I think Raph, you touched on this. It's funny how much synergy it has in everything else I do. So I'll give you an example. My full-time job is with an M&A firm. That M&A firm now loves the fact that I do podcasts because that's always a soft intro to the founder. My man's smiling because you know why, right? Instead of me saying, hey, like, you know, cold calling, hi, this is George Khalife calling you, you know, instead of doing that, I can just be like, hey, we'd love to have you on my podcast and share your story. They're more willing to do it. That's the first touch, right? The second touch, Marc said this, how soft will it be if I call them up again and be like, hey, Dan, how's it going? We'd love to just catch up again after our podcast, go for a coffee. Now you have an intimate relationship with a founder. And so I think you can find your voice if you continue to do it, and you'll naturally know what you want to talk about. So don't spend hours thinking about, like, oh, what my theme's going to be. Just figure out, like, a subject line you're passionate about, and you'll know. Like, I don't know if you guys love podcasts, but, like, I'll be ironing my clothes and I'll listen to a podcast. You know what I mean? I'm that type of, like, weirdo. I'll be walking to a meeting and I'll have, like, Joe Rogan on, you know? So, I don't know, find your niche and then stick with it.
Hi guys.
Yeah.
I feel like this is Hattie. I have more of a tactical question. So, I'm just guessing because I don't have a podcast, though I've made like different types of content, but I'm obsessed with podcasts. So, in creating one, I'm guessing that you have like the pre-phase of hunting down people and trying to get connections and setting up the dates, and then the actual, you know, recording and editing piece, and then the marketing afterwards. So, you guys already talked a bit about getting people on the podcast, but could you touch a little bit on which one of those three, and please correct me if I'm wrong and there's more than three or whatever, which one of those three segments is the hardest for you, or which you found the most challenging, and maybe some specific tactics or tools that you use, either in the editing, recording, and maybe in the marketing after the fact? Maybe that's a lot. Like, maybe make it a quick bullet list, 2 things or something.
So I think the most challenging part is the editing part, just because that's the least enjoyable one. I'll be completely honest with you, right? And then going through every little bit, trying to clean it up and whatnot. I use GarageBand. I am a version control freak, so I have like V1, which means this, and that's when I trim it out. V2, I stitch it together. V3, I make the intros and outros. So very systematic about that as well. So that's kind of how I do it, and yeah, I think the research part probably takes the longest, but that's also the most enjoyable part.
Yeah, for me, it's been not necessarily editing. I mean, we have someone that we found at a great rate that helps, and I try to keep it super minimal on the intros and outros and all that stuff, and make edit notes as if things come up. The hardest, and the reason why I recorded an intro in the car, is because that's the episode coming out tomorrow. So the hardest is just staying up with the system of it, right? Like, you need show notes. Whether they're big or small, you need show notes. You need episode numbers, you need graphic. If you're going to push it on social, you need social media blurb, you need to check the handles, you need to get their photo, their bio. Like, there's so many things that what we use now, and I work with one of our designers, and it's like kind of like clockwork. We use Basecamp for all our project management. I just have a template set up in there now. So, new episode comes out, load up the template, guest name, location, show notes, special links, like everything's in there, and you just dial it in. And I find as much as possible to just batch record intros, depending on how you're doing it. Like for me, I record the intros after the fact, but try to, you know, get in maybe 3 intros or something and batch them up. Because if you, like in our case, it's a weekly podcast, and I struggle with that every week to try to keep it up, for example. So the more templated or systematized, this is where a lot of your thinking comes into play, the better, at least for me.
Yeah, so I'm like totally left field from Raph, and that's why I think we're like really good friends. Like I work very differently, right? I'm not as like systemized and stuff, and I think that's a great strength to have. I just don't have it, you know, and it's really like not in my arena. And I think even especially with editing and stuff, it never was, and I was super okay with it. And so really what I've done is just outsource it. I'm happy to pay like $200 for filming editing. Thankfully, I have like a great friend who does that. But obviously, it's also not scalable. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like I'll do it now once a month. But I'd rather like what I learned from doing the episode with Michael Hyatt was like when I actually watched it. Raph, I think you said this, like be happy watching something you create. That was really like maybe one out of like 5 of the episodes that I was like really, really happy to create. But it's also okay because you have to start somewhere. But now I realize that I'd love to have like those founders I really want to talk to and kind of showcase their story, but also have the production behind it where I'm like, damn, like that was one of my podcasts, you know what I mean? And so I'm cool doing it like once a month because I know, given everything else I'm doing, it's not reasonable, at least given my portfolio right now, to do it like twice a week as an example. So you've got to find your frequency and more importantly, fill those weaknesses where you know they are, like editing or filming, whatever, and just outsource them. It makes it easier, and I can focus on actually hosting the podcast, the questions, the actual production.
A lot of hands went up, so don't feel all 3 of you obligated to answer every question, so we can answer as many. And if anybody has a specific question for a specific person, feel free to ask that specific person.
Awesome. Hey guys, so my questions are on content creation. When you start a new season, or you have you're starting the podcast, do you feel like the first few episodes, let's say the first 3 episodes, there's not a lot of pressure, so you're creating the episodes and it's all good, and then at 4, 5, and 6, let's say, you start feeling, okay, maybe I should sit on the left side a little bit more, like it's like you're trying to put pressure on yourself. Do you have that, or if you do, how do you overcome it?
I actually started trying to reduce pressure because you just touched on this a bit. The worst thing that can happen while you're recording an episode or interviewing someone is that you're constantly thinking of, is the audio working? Is the light right if you're doing video? Or like, is someone gonna walk by or honk their horn? Like all of that stuff. So for me, quickly, and on my side too, we had interviewed like maybe 50 plus people in written form before that. So shifting from, and I was recording the audio just to write them up, but shifting from that to a podcast really was a hard thing because like you typically want to always agree, right? Like, but that starts getting a bit boring, or it's not, it's not the greatest sound when you're listening back, and then that also means you're gonna have to edit that out, right? So the more you can kind of set your mind up to not worry about those things and like create some sort of system so that things are kind of fail-safe, you have backups or something that you can really dial in on the interview. And I agree, I mean, we've outsourced a bit of stuff, and I'd like to do more. I've done one episode where it was in like a full-blown studio, and it was the greatest feeling ever. There was a little production person there, and like I was 100%, the first time ever 100% into the interview.
I feel like Jay Leno.
A little bit. But yeah, but it's tough, obviously. But I wouldn't ever let that stop you from creating it, ever.
Thanks.
I got one question for each of you, but it's really fast. Game changer book that you have each read that you could recommend?
Cool. So for me, it's just one, right?
Only one.
All right,
one each.
That's
Keep it quick.
That's stuff. We're all nerds here, but for me, it's The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, Robin Sharma. I think UFD graduate, so love that book. Definitely recommend it. I'll just slide the second one, please. The Alchemist.
Oh, just read The Alchemist. So good. So good. I can't even pronounce his last name, but Alex Benanian, but it's The Third Door. That in terms of like what we've been talking about, accessing people, incredible book. I felt like he described the making of Keo and Ray Dalio principles.
For me, it's not a personal development book. I would actually say *The Sapiens*. Just understanding the history of humans and how we got here and like how we survived over the years, really puts in perspective about the idea of fear and danger and what is like a social construct and what is real and what is not, and it really gives you power and like understanding of like how you can navigate this world.
All right, hi everyone, I'm Richard. Right, so I'm quite multifaceted, so I've got like a varied range of interests. So today I'm in tech, tomorrow I'm in music, the other day fashion, and I'm also quite entrepreneurial, so I always want to make these things into businesses. And my friend and I were literally just discussing that we just get so cluttered mentally in terms of there's just so much that you can do, and you just really want to focus that into you guys have got 3 podcasts, but they're very different. And how did you narrow that down to say that I'm going to go into this direction? And secondly, what was the amount of time that you gave yourself to say, if this didn't work, I need to move on? And because it's very difficult, because you think the general advice is, when you want to give up, then you just put a little bit more, and you need just a little bit more, but then sometimes you really should just give up and fail quickly and evolve and move on. So how are you navigating that space, or how have you navigated that space in deciding what to niche into and how much time to invest into that development as well?
Okay, so that's a great question. Okay. The first thing is, I would say, from a macro perspective, it's okay to be a generalist. My dad, who's always supported me, but he's always been more on be specific, right? Like find something niche. He's much more academic too, as you can see. My mom's more like the street smart salesperson, but I kind of balance both. The one thing I learned is it's okay to be a generalist so long as you have a focus on a few things that you can control, because otherwise you can't. You'll almost be average in a lot of the things. For a podcast specifically, I actually went general first. So my thing, my tagline was interviewing successful people in different industries. That's it. I made it super generic. And I looked at the networks that I had in my control, and I just went to the ones I found interesting to actually talk with, right? And kind of the stories that I wanted to pull from. From there, what happened, and it was more natural, is I just gravitated more towards founders, specifically tech founders. I loved their stories. I don't know what it was. It was through my work and a lot of influence there, and then I just pivoted. What you were speaking to in terms of giving up, it's more being emotional to your product or service or whatever, and you cannot be. I think that's the portion you were speaking of. You can't be tied emotionally to something, especially when it sucks shit. That's just the truth, because the market's not gonna lie. Gary Vee talks about this, and it's very true. If you launch something and you're trying and you're pivoting and whatever, and there's just no traction for it at one point, and if there's no traction after you've pivoted and you've tried to listen to the market, then yeah, try something different. But don't give up just because something bad happens, like what we were talking about previously. My first episode almost cut out 12 minutes in. I didn't tell you guys this, but my DSLR literally cuts out 12 minutes because it can't record video. I didn't know that. Luckily, I had my friend filming, so when it tuned out, he pressed record and there was 5 seconds that cut out. But if he wasn't there, I would have had the whole first episode just not recorded. Does that mean I'm gonna quit? No, but it really sucked shit. If you look back on my first episode, our head was cut off. It was a terrible production, which was great. But it doesn't mean that you can't improve it, and just be patient with your craft, because that's the only way you're gonna make it work.
Two things. I think we were the opposite of not being specific or going broad. You hear it in the intro of the podcast. My name is Marc. It's my job to unpack the mental fitness practices of people living at the top of their game, personally and professionally. So we're really dialed in on that, because our thing is that the guests that we're trying to interview, you can probably research their backstories. They only spend 20% and 30%, and the rest is what we need for the app, is the practices, right? So, that's been our approach. But then in terms of whether it's successful or not, I don't know. I think it's just, what's the comparison? If you compare, Keo Conversations to Tom Billio, probably sucks, right? It's not. But also, I think the most important thing is look for the signs. We're starting to get Random House Publishing reaching out with authors, and okay, that must mean something, right? We don't have sponsors or anything like that on the podcast, but these are little signs that I feel are validating that, okay, well, there must be something we're doing all right. But then for me, it's a personal thing. It's like the connections and what we're also, I think, all saying, learning from these conversations. It's almost hard to say any podcast is a failure, really, right?
I would tie it back to the whole why aspect of it. I think, and I think this is consistent for all three of us. Along the way, things might change, right? You might narrow down, you might pivot, the type of discussions and topics you might talk about, the type of guests you have on the show, whether it's a podcast or a vlog or whatever the next AR, VR thing might be. It doesn't matter. Like, I think that how is always going to change along the way, but I think that initial why, that intent, constantly checking in with that is really important. That kind of helps out, and that also helps you keep going, right? And if you find that, like just getting feedback along the way, right? Like, much like Marc, like I don't really check the numbers, so to speak, but I gauge it on feedback based on the text messages, the in-person feedbacks and comments. Is this something that's adding value, yes or no, and how can I further improve? And if I catch myself in a situation where I'm not getting a lot of that, then it's time to rethink about how I execute on that and what I deliver. But the intent about enabling people to be intentional about their personal development success, I don't think will ever change.
Just want to say thank you for sharing your journeys and this amazing talk. Two-part question. The first part is that what is your biggest and the worst fear with this current journey that you're on? And what has been the biggest mistake that you have made since you started this journey, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, Marc, just offloading that. I like it. It's a great question, man. I think this stuff also changes over time, right? But I think for me, the biggest fear is really regret. And I always say that, and I'm not trying to give you a templated answer, but I think regret, in the micro, today, right? What I don't want to regret is if I had an idea to do a podcast when I was working at TMX and nobody was doing it, then I wouldn't do it because I would be afraid of what my manager would think. Because that's going to haunt me. When I have, no capability of doing it anymore, I'm going to look back and be like, I wish I could have done something so easily. And so I think I never want to wake up and feel that. And you see that all the time, especially with parents. And they feed that toxicity to their kids, right? When you see a parent look at their kid and say, you can't do that. There's something a little wrong with that, don't you think? It's just not right. And that's mostly because of their upbringing. It kind of trickles down. I almost want to be an uplifter versus an anchor. And I think that's the biggest fear I had. Your other question was, what was the biggest challenge?
The biggest mistake that you've made?
Biggest mistake I've made?
Since the start of the journey?
Honestly, it was more so listening to other people. I think we all go through that at times, and I'm very honest about it. And I think, the grade 5 example, I paid much more attention to what people define me as versus myself. Nobody thought I was going to go to university. That's just the truth, because I really was bad in middle school. And it's not a joke. My parents sent me to private school, a really strict one, because they thought there's just no hope. And I think I let a lot of people's opinion of me become that reality, and there was that insecurity and the weight challenges and stuff. All of it together just made things really challenging, right, early on. And moving to a lot of high schools didn't help, because I always had to change that personality and have friends that it was kind of a weird moment. And then at university, I focused a lot on really working on that self-awareness. And one book that really helped me was Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins, and I read that when I was 18. And that helped fix a lot of my relationships, even with my sister, with my parents. There was a lot of things internally that I had to fix, and now I take accountability for everything. I always look at myself, how can I make that better? If I had a challenge, or if I went into a wrong situation, what did I do that brought me there? Because really they're all choices, right, if you think about it. And so what can you learn from it? And now the perspectives change a lot, and everything I do, if I really feel my gut instinct tells me that that's the right thing and it makes me happy, I'm going to do it. I don't give a fuck who tells me not to. So.
I'll stick to the biggest mistake. This might surprise me, but launching a tech company without a technical co-founder. But at the same time, maybe my partner and I, then what was the alternative? We wouldn't have done it. And what came out of that was we doubled down for a year to build content and build this network and relationship, which in turn is our most valuable thing at this point. But it delayed our launch over a year, obviously cost a lot more money. And back to intuition and the gut, we knew that was the wrong, like there were things coming up that we knew didn't feel right. And having a partner, I would feel okay, he would feel not okay, and vice versa. And we've since then agreed we have to be 100% aligned because one of our gut feelings is the right one. So that sucked big time.
I think for me, the biggest fear is the regret of not enjoying this process, right? And I think that's pretty, like everyone talks about it, but when you're in the motion, I think anyone here who is doing something that they care about, something that they really want to make happen, that constant grind, that constant motion, like you're like swamped with so many things, and I just want to make sure I still enjoy it and really be present for it. That's something I'm not good at personally. That's something that early in my career in consulting, I did very good. Like I moved very quickly, but I didn't really enjoy it. And a couple of years later, I quickly realized I had no idea what really happened in that process, and that's a mistake I don't want to repeat again.
Lauren?
You had said just with trying to get people on your podcast, you would reach out to the CEO of RBC. If they didn't respond, how many more times would you follow up with them? How often, and how many different avenues would you use for that cross?
I'd cancel my debit. Well, what's funny is, I'll tell you like what I said in my message. My subject line was, why a 25-year-old wants to interview you on their podcast. Okay, so the first thing is like, Raph, you pointed this out, which I agree with 100%, like go to the decision makers. But it's also like how much time you spend in crafting an email, and also how persistent you are. I'll tell you a different story about that. In my actual body, I related it to a lot of things that we can resonate with. My dad worked at RBC. He was like a manager for diplomats for their accounts and whatever, and I mentioned that. And I remember like going on career day when I was a kid, going to RBC, looking at the vault, and that's what kind of sparked my passion for banking. I put that in the body, right? So like, it's not like I sent him like, hey Dave, like would love to have you on my podcast, cheers, G, like doing shit like that is not gonna get you a response. I hope not. That's the first thing. With persistence, like it's just about hustle, right? Like I will it won't be like stalkers, but like I'll literally like find every platform, and it's like consistent. You post on LinkedIn, I'm gonna be the first to like it. You're on like Instagram, I'm gonna like your pic. Like it's just being there and being genuine about it. Like I remember in the second year of university, I wanted to work for this investment fund. I was in Ottawa. There weren't many. There was like two. And one I really wanted to work for. I just wanted to write a white paper. I kept emailing the CEO every single, I think every 2 weeks on Monday at like 8 a.m. Hi Benoit, like legit, you can ask him. Hi Benoit, how's it going? Would love to write a white paper. It's for free. I just want to do research for your firm, please. Every 2 weeks, like begging you, brother, like just let me do this. I just want to put my name on the paper. Never replied. For like 6 months, never replied. And I had all these email chains. And then I'd give him a call sometimes, and I don't know what else to do. And so at one point, back to what Raph was saying, one of the associates was coming down the building one day, and I just had a coffee, and I'm like, I need like 5 minutes of your time. Like, I just need to know what a day in life is at this, it's called Exponent. And I want to talk to you about it because I really want to join the firm. And like the CEO knew about this. I was in Dubai at the time. He sent me a reply. He's like, dude, look, I honestly give up on you. You're filling up my mailbox, man. Just take the damn internship, please. Just do the paper. Tell me how I can help you, and that's it. That was it. So like persistency is really important, but knowing how to do it and being genuine, but just like hustle, do whatever the hell you have to do to get something you really want, because 99% of people say they will, but I guarantee you they won't, right?
And if he had said no,
yeah,
would you follow up again?
100%.
Okay.
Happy Easter now. Yeah, whatever. I'll just keep going until you're ready to whatever it is. I'll bring you like a gift. I'll send you like a little frame to your office. I'll keep going until it's not necessarily to get that. It's just I'm more so motivated by showing him that I just wanted to establish a relationship, and even if this falls through, I still want to be your friend, right?
But that's what I think you nailed. It's just the personal aspect of it, right? I highly encourage that, The Third Door by Alex, because that is all about reaching unreachable people. I'll just give one example. One of the early influencers we had on the podcast that we had no business having on the podcast, Kevin Rose, the founder of Dig. I just shot a cold email out, nothing, obviously. But again, like months and months of listening to his content and him being interviewed and resharing stuff on Twitter, DMs, nothing. And then eventually he talked about this love of Japanese print journals. So at the time, my partner was in Dubai. I'm like, hey, Kevin Rose likes these Japanese journals. This is the make. It's like, I'm standing in front of a stationery store, which is full of those journals. Buy the journal. So, and we were going to New York for another meeting. Like, we're going to show up at that time he was running Hodinkee, the watch blog. We're just going to show up and we're going to drop off this handwritten note with the journal and see what happens type thing, to have them part of it. We land, carry-ons, we're like getting changed at the little hotel beside. They were in a WeWork. We go up there. Hodinkee moved last month. Wow, that's amazing. So completely deflated. We have this journal. Now we're going back home, and then there's a light bulb that we were launching a MailChimp campaign at the time, and we were really annoyed that the version we had to always put our address and all that stuff, right? But then we're like, holy shit, I'm getting his newsletter, so that means his address of some sort is there, which was a P.O. box in Soho. We sent the journal, and 4 months later, I got a Skype, hey, do you want to Skype? So I think the theme, though, that everyone's talking about is just like who's sending him Japanese journals, right? It's that personal part, just like what you shared, right? And then not giving up, right? The third door, that book is all about going through the third door. You either go in VIP in the line, or you're waiting in the giant line, or you're kicking down the window in the back door, and that's kind of what we're talking about, and that's the third door.
Okay, so I'll close with this. As someone who just entered the podcast space, myself and Lauren, I wanted to get your feedback on your views on the future of podcasting. Like today, I'm seeing a lot of major corporations as well entering into the space as a new engagement channel. So what is your view on like podcasts in the next couple of years? Do you think it's going to continue to grow?
I think from a tech perspective, it'll probably be more live in real time to get that kind of real time feedback and engagement. And then you fast forward like 5-10 years, it's going to go into like the whole AR, VR realm if you want to go down that path.
Yeah, I think more engagement. I mean, even us, we're trying to figure out how to load in prompts and have people answer questions as you listen to the podcast. But at the same time, like there's like people and brands that I really respect that are just starting podcasts now. And I'm like, okay, well, they're obviously still going when some of the other pioneers are probably thinking like, we missed the boat type thing. But I think it goes back to it's super cool. So just keep rocking your brand, right?
I think what I would say to that is I definitely agree. Like emerging tech, like VR, AR is going to be a thing. Maybe even like voice, like something with them, like Alexa and maybe the HomePods as well, where it makes it a little easier. Like if you're cleaning your house, you can listen to podcasts, right? So I think audio is definitely one. But I would say like from a maybe medium or frequency perspective is figure out what works for you. Raph, like you were saying, real-time live. I love doing that in the beginning because I never wanted to edit. I went like against status quo. I didn't want to edit. I wanted it to be raw and have an intro and have a conclusion. It was 30 minutes. This is what you get. You know, if I screw up, here it is. You know, and so that's what I like personally, and it worked for me. So figure out like maybe what channels you want to put it on. If it's audio, maybe it's not video. I don't know. And so I think that's probably the best thing is finding that medium, because what we're all going to have difficulty with now is how do you break through the noise? You know, there's so much content out there that like it's a little bit difficult to capture people's attention. What we're all doing is really capturing that asset. How do you capture someone's attention in a 24-hour window when they have Snapchat and still like I can't even breathe talking about it because there's so much. I follow people on IG and everybody has like stories on all the time. They're speaking in events. Like, how am I going to get someone to capture me speaking at this event right now with Raph and Marc versus what's happening in the cannabis world at this second? You know,
yeah.
Like that's tough to do. And when you can win that battle, then you have something. So work with it.
And thank you everybody for coming to our event tonight.
Yeah.